long time ago, I studied in Lund. And I decided to study political science. And when you do that, you're supposed to start working for the Swedish government in some way. And at that time, you could actually get a job at the foreign ministry or something. So they kind of made one mistake. That was the last semester, they sent us all up to Stockholm to try to find jobs. And we went to very exciting places like the National Accounting Department, I don't know the name, Riksrevisionsverket. And you know, the guys who work with all the hospitals in Sweden, all these really interesting places. And after one day, we found out that it was extremely boring. So we all decided, no, we can never work for the public sector. Let's go and get drunk instead. And that is actually what we did. So I decided to do something else. So I became a consultant. That is typically what you do there immediately after you stop studying, because then you think you know everything. So of course you become a consultant then to tell everybody else what to do. So I did that for a couple of years. I went into advertising. I had a small advertising agency of my own. I worked at one of the larger agencies down here as well. And then after a time when I was freelancing, I got a job offer from one of my customers at that time called Iveco Trucks, who do a bit bigger trucks than this one. So I became the marketing director for Iveco Trucks in the Nordics. Then one of my friends called me one day and said, "Oh, aren't you tired of trucks? You should go into ICT." And a company at that time called VM Data down here, which is now CGI, I think, they needed a regional manager. So I said, okay, why not? Trucks, computers, never mind. I studied social science, so I didn't know anything about trucks. So then I went into computers instead. So I did that for a couple of years. And then during the ICT crisis in 2001, the company decided to consolidate everything. And since we were working mainly with user interface and user friendliness and fluffy stuff, and computer companies, these big giants, often think that no, engineers are much more important than graphic designers and user interface guys. We can't work with that anymore. I did a management buyout and took the company with me down here. So I employed 30 of my former colleagues, started the company on my own, had that for a couple of years, sold it to another small ICT company, and went into ICT for media for a couple of years at a small ICT company here in Malmö called Teknik Media. In 2007, we got quite a big job for the Swedish public television. We actually built SVT Play. Maybe some of you have used that. So we were kind of pioneers in video streaming. I still didn't know anything about technology. I could just sell stuff. And then something happens that happens to all men when they turn 40. They get one of these crises in life. They need to do something else, change wife or car or something. So I decided to leave and quit my job and go to Biarritz and learn to wave surf. I never got to Biarritz. I ended up in the kind of public innovation system and worked for 7 years helping startup to internationalize. And that is what I'm going to tell you about today. Today, I work with something called Clusterland Sweden, which is partly or mainly because you're here. We are sometimes take part of EU-funded projects. So this seminar, this training is actually sponsored or paid by the European Commission. So we should say thank you to the European Commission for having this nice seminar for you. We are part of a project called DigiStart, which actually aims to foster new European entrepreneurs through a collaboration between Sweden, Portugal, and the UK. So if somebody of you is interested in going to an accelerator program in Portugal, for instance, I can absolutely help you to direct you in the right way, or in the UK and so on. Besides that, I'm part owner of a couple of small startups down here in Skåne. One is a brew house called Brewhouse Finn. I see you had the wrong type of beer here today. We need to change that. Another one is a small company that does a smart watering can that tells you when it's time to water your plants, called Freya. A third one is a company in Luxembourg that does a web community for Chinese tourists coming to Europe. And then I'm part of a small company here called Learning to Sleep. We do cognitive behavior therapy for people with a sleeping disorder. We are market leaders in Sweden in doing that. And then I'm also in the board of Mink and some other stuff. So I have a lot of things to do, as you can see. Okay, so internationalization. I have met about somewhere between 100 and 150 startups when I worked with internationalization and when I worked with helping startups, and I still do that in some sense. And everybody came to me and said, oh, we have read this report from one of these governmental organizations talking about internationalization. And they say that they can help us to become successful on the international market because they have this program that I can join. And it will only cost me like 50,000 Swedish because the state will pay the rest. Isn't that a terrific idea? And in the beginning I thought, yes, that's a great idea. It sounds like a fabulous idea. And my experience is that it's not. Because the problem with all these programs is they think that everybody looks the same. They think that they have created some sort of happy pill for startups and SMEs. And if we just give that happy pill to somebody sitting here in Malmö or in Stockholm or in Dublin, you will immediately be successful on an international market. And it doesn't work that way because we know that all companies are different. Companies have different needs, different types of people, different types of products, different types of services, which means that their internationalization strategy can't be the same. I have worked mainly in ICT, and I suppose that since Foo Café is slightly directed towards the ICT sector, I suppose that some of you also work in ICT or something that is ICT related. And the first thing that comes on your mind when you talk to people that work with internationalization is, of course, oh, we need to go to Silicon Valley. And in the beginning, I also said, yes, let's take the companies to Silicon Valley. It sounds like a great idea. The weather is nice. You can go wave surfing. There are great things to do. San Francisco has a lot of great food. It's so fun. And it's also one of the most complicated places in the world to go to if you run a startup, right? And you don't really understand that when you sit here. And of course, if you have the best idea, the best product in the world with no competition, maybe Silicon Valley is the right place to go. But for 99.9% of the companies that I meet, don't have the best new idea in the world. And at that time, Silicon Valley is a totally stupid place to go to because competition is the highest in the world. So everybody is different. That was kind of the first lesson. They're like this market with baskets. You need to understand what type of basket you are and where you should go. And stop looking at these markets where everybody else go. So when we had been doing mistakes for 4 years at the place where I worked, going to all these places where everybody else went, we decided, oh, maybe we should go somewhere where nobody goes. So instead of going to the US West Coast, we went to the US East Coast and discovered that if it takes you 50 phone calls to get one meeting with somebody in San Francisco, it takes you maybe 5 phone calls to get a similar meeting in New York or in Washington. And if you go to an even more crazy place like Durham in North Carolina, it actually takes you one phone call to get really good meeting. And then somebody says, yes, but why should you go to Durham, North Carolina? Oh, it depends. If you have a startup here and you're looking for, how many of you run a startup? Okay, some of you. How many of you sometimes needs developers or ICT guys or people that work with ICT? Some of you do, yes. Okay, so where is the most expensive place in the world to hire a developer? Maybe Copenhagen. Copenhagen is quite expensive. I would say San Francisco actually, but Copenhagen is maybe competing on that. Okay, and still everybody goes to San Francisco. If you go to Durham in North Carolina, where IBM and HTC and some of these huge giants had some resource facilities, which they have closed down, which means that there are loads of unemployed engineers in Durham. You will actually get people who are subsidized by the state, North Carolina, which means that the salaries are maybe 1/5 or 1/6 of the salaries in Copenhagen or in San Francisco. And if you start a company in Durham, you will pay 0% company tax for the first 5 years. So if you run a company where you need developers and you need a site in the US, maybe you should start looking at other places than the places where you normally go. And that is kind of what we found out during this journey that we had with all these companies. This is another place where a lot of Swedish company goes to Asia. And it's fantastic. We went with maybe 20 Swedish startups to Hong Kong, China, and Taiwan. Why? Because some governmental agency in Sweden had a program for startups going to Asia. Sounds like a good idea? No, it's not a good idea, because if you are a small startup of 2 persons, you can't afford the cost it takes to enter especially the Chinese market. Even if the Chinese market is huge, you need to realize that you need maybe 10 million Swedish or something just to enter the market. You can do that if you're Volvo or SKF or some large multinational corporation, not if you're a startup. If you have somebody investing a lot of money in your company, maybe you could do it. If you have a product that is directed specifically towards the Chinese market, yes. But you need to realize that you need money, because you can't do business by yourself in China if you come from Malmö. It's impossible. First of all, you will realize that, okay, it takes, I don't know how many meetings we went on with different types of Chinese official people. And we all got drunk because everybody was drinking these tremendous amounts of alcohol, and you didn't really understand that, oh, this was kind of the business culture, and you need to follow that culture. And then the week after you had met all these people, said, okay, did we decide anything? Oh, we don't know. And it wasn't. It sounds like that. Oh, of course, because you were drunk. But that was not. No, but it was just that we didn't understand the culture. So you need to find somebody in China that will help you, and that will cost you money. So maybe it's not the first place a startup should start doing business in, because it's so difficult. Even if you go to Hong Kong, which is much easier because they have this semi-European mindset, it's still really difficult. Only reason to go to these places, of course, if you have production of something. If you're going to produce electronics and you have a ready prototype and you know what to do and you have a good contact, then you should go. But then you're not a startup anymore. Then you have already done something. Then we went to this place. Another failure, I would say. It was funny already in the newspaper today that there is a big Swedish delegation at the moment in Brazil. Oh, the princess is there and the king and some ministers, and everybody loves to go to Brazil. I don't know why. Because it's really nice. I've been to Brazil a couple of times. It's a great place to go. People are really friendly. It's totally impossible to do business. Number one, they have 800% import tax on everything. So if some of you are developing ICT programs and you want to sell your program in Brazil, you need to put 800% on top of your sales price. 800%. That's a lot, right? In tax, unless you start a company in Brazil. So then you think, okay, let's start a company in Brazil. But that will take you like 1 year in administration, and you need to find a Brazilian CEO, because that is the rule. Otherwise, you're not allowed to start a company. They have all this strange legislation around starting companies that is so difficult. I can't understand why all politicians go to Brazil. Besides that, of course, it's fun to go to Rio and have a swim at Copacabana, I'm sure. But no, doing business as a startup in Brazil, it's impossible. Instead, all startups should go to Chile. Why? Because in Chile, they love Sweden. There's some good history between Sweden and Chile, right? And Sweden and Chile have a trade treaty, which means that we pay no tax when we sell things in Chile. And Chile is also part of the South American Trade Treaty, which means that if you have an office in Chile, you can actually sell to Brazil without paying 800% income tax, right? That was a very valuable free advice I just gave to a lot of people through that camera. That's great. I like that. We also went to Tokyo, because people are talking about, oh, Japan. Japan sounds like a great market. Lots of people, crowded, they buy electronic stuff all the time. Japan is fantastic. Yes, it is. These are some robots it's not girls, it's some robots that we met at the place in Tokyo. It's a totally, I have never met a business culture that I have understood less than this. It's totally messed up business culture. You can't understand it. You meet people who are polite, who you talk to, and nothing happens at all. And then after 1 year, they send you an email. Thank you so much for the nice meeting we had 1 year ago. We might be interested in your product. Could we meet again? And I said, well, that was 1 year ago. We don't have that product anymore. We have already gone here. We are somewhere else now. It's so strange. It's the same as in China. You need to have a local contact. It will cost you loads of money to enter these markets. And still, back to my first slide, still we think that these governmental organizations that are supposed to help us, they talk about these countries all the time. You know, the BRIC countries, you have heard about that. Brazil, Russia, India, China. The 4 most difficult countries in the world to sell to. Of course, it's expanding economies, but it's totally crazy to go there as a startup. It's just waste of time and money. Don't do that. And of course, don't go to places where it's dangerous. That's kind of an instinct that you should have. This was a sign. I was in Skopje in Macedonia, and this was a sign actually on a door to a restaurant. So we don't allow dogs in the restaurant, and also not guns. So, I mean, that's kind of obvious. Try to avoid that. Something else you need to know when it comes to internationalization. We first thought, okay, we will bring some companies to the US and they will do business. And they will do it. They will have a business deal after 2 days. No, things takes 10 times more time than you think in the beginning. Even if you sit down, do your business plan, think that, okay, I will internationalize my business. It will take me this amount of money, or this amount of money and this amount of time. You should at least double the time that you think, even if in the worst case. Because I would say in Northern Europe, we are kind of used to, if I send an email to Micael here, which I sometimes does, he actually responds me within, let's say within 24 hours at least. Yeah, that is if he is very slow and lazy and so, yeah. But in the rest of the world, if you send somebody an email, it can, sometimes they answer within 1 hour, and sometimes it takes 3 weeks. And if you're sitting here, where everything is so, I mean, we live in kind of a society here in southern Sweden where, and in Copenhagen, where everything goes so fast all the time. People are used, we are texting each other, we expect that somebody replies within a minute, and then you realize that other cultures, and I'm not saying that's right, I'm actually more thinking that's maybe not so right. But when we do business, we must realize that you have other time frames in other types of cultures, and you need to respect that. That's why it was so funny that I actually still get mails from these guys that I met in Japan. It's now 2.5 years ago or something. And they still send emails to me saying, oh, it was so nice to meet you. And when are you coming back to Japan? We would like to meet you again. I said, oh, are you crazy? I have done 50 different things since we met. But it's another culture. Another thing that I think that we often do as a mistake is that we start internationalizing with places far away for some reason. And that is, normally I wouldn't blame the startups for that, because if you look at public incentives that we have in Sweden, it's easier to get money from Vinnova or Tillväxtverket and these guys if you go to the US than it is if you want to go to Norway. Because if you go to Norway, you can afford it by yourself. Going to the US is expensive, so we'll give you money, which means that everybody will typically go to the US instead of going to Norway. And that is kind of a mistake, I think, because I think that internationalization starts very close to where you are as a company. And then there are some expectations or some sometimes, of course, it's wise to go to the US. If you have really state-of-the-art technology and you know you have it and you have your patent and everything, then you might go somewhere else. But for 95% of the companies, your neighbors are your best possible customers. Actually, I think I'll just skip these. That was some companies that we have helped during the years. So, some things you should do. I have talked about mistakes now. What should you do when you internationalize? Some simple rules. You should avoid places with a lot of bureaucracy. I've talked about that. Places like Brazil, for instance, loads of bureaucracy. Avoid that. If it's simple, it's probably right. I'm sure there is some guru guy like Dalai Lama or somebody who says things like that. But it's kind of true when it comes to internationalization. If it is easy, it's probably right. And what is easy? Well, everything that is within EU is quite easy compared to things that are outside EU, right? So if it's easy, it's probably right. Work with your neighbors. This is one of our neighbor countries, right? It's also the #1 export market for Sweden, if you look at statistics. It's not the US, it's not China, it's Norway. Norway is the primary export market for Swedish products. Strange to take in, but it's true. What's the second largest export market for Sweden, do you think? You could say Denmark, but Denmark is actually number, I think, 3 or 4. Germany, that's right. You know, Berlin, these guys. That's the second largest export market for Swedish startups. If somebody comes on an event like this and have a startup and they just ask me, oh, Micael, we have decided, we have got 1 million Swedish crowns to start internationalization. We got it from somewhere, an investor. Where should we start? Normally I would say, well, Germany, maybe the UK, it depends. But if you can find somebody that speaks German, then you should go to Germany. Why? Because in Germany they like Swedish technology, right? This sounds like something that happens in James Bond's movies or something. Yeah, exactly. Okay, okay. No, somebody's coming to disarm it. It's okay. Yeah. So, interesting. Huh? It will quit. Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, you see. Or something with that will happen. Nice. No, so I mean, in Germany, they like Swedish technology, right? They like our queen. They think that Swedes are nice people. They like going to vacation. These things matters when you do internationalization. If you go into a German company and say, I'm from Sweden, I'm here to sell something, they will listen to you because Sweden has such a good brand in Germany. And it's a 50-minute flight to Berlin, the German capital, compared to a 12-hour flight to San Francisco, right? So you can take the early morning plane to Berlin, be there in the city at 9, spend 1 day of meeting and go back home in the evening. Or you can spend a nice night in Berlin. I promise you they have some nice restaurants nowadays. Do some more business meetings the next day and go home. And it will cost you less than, I would say, 1,500 Swedish crowns because you can find plane tickets to Berlin for 600-700 crowns and hotels are really, really cheap in Germany. Compare that to a trip to San Francisco or Hong Kong or somewhere else, which will cost you a fortune. It's the best place to test, probably to test if your product or service is mature enough to internationalize. Next thing, you should go where you can find the talent. If you are a knowledge-intense company or a company that needs good salespeople, try to see where can we find talent that has the right, what should we say, quota between cost and knowledge. If you take that into account, I'm not sure that San Francisco, I mean, some of the smartest brains might be in San Francisco or in Beijing or in Shanghai or in Singapore, these places, but they will cost you a fortune. I'm sure that you can find really, really smart people at other places, but you will need local talent. So try to see how you can find the right talent at the places you go. You should also try to think about prices when you go abroad. Pricing in other countries are not the same as pricing in Sweden, which means that you can not just choose or listen to somebody else on how to price your products when you go to other countries. You need to find out by yourself how to do pricing. Then I think you should go to nice places, because if you go to places that you like, you will perform better. Sometimes maybe the smartest rational business decision is to go to a place where it's really, really cold in the winter and dark and people are angry all the time. But they might have the best financial environment for your company. Or the second best financial environment is somewhere where it's nice and you can sit out here and have a nice drink, and like here in Lyon, for instance, or something. Where should you go? Well, you shouldn't go to places you don't want to go to, right? Because that will affect your performance when you're there. You should go to places, because when you run a startup, you are just a couple of people, normally, which means that one of you has to go on that business trip. You can't go 2 or 3 together. And the worst thing, one of the worst things, is to sit alone in a hotel room. It's snowing outside, it's dark, everybody else is angry, and life is like hell, right? Then it's better to go somewhere where it's nice, because then you will feel nice, and then you want to go there again. And if you go to places that you like, you will actually perform better. I know that for myself. I think most people are like that.
But yet, Norway is your biggest market.
I said Norway. Norway is Sweden's largest export market. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that's something that's due to Systembolaget in Strömstad. I don't know, but yeah, those who are from Sweden will understand that. But that's why I said that I recommend people to go to Berlin, because Berlin is a nice place to go. So and that will affect you. I mean, you don't want to sit at home and Sunday evening saying, "Oh shit, I'm going to that place again tomorrow morning." You need to feel great. Now I'm going again, and I'm going to do business, because that is what you want to do, right? When you go abroad. Back to places where to go. This is Sweden's maybe 3rd or 4th largest market, and if you are into mobile services or mobile, I would probably prefer London. Just to give you a very concrete advice, I would probably prefer London before going to Berlin, because London is at the moment the hottest place in Europe to go. I know it's hard to find talent there, but you can actually place yourself in Sheffield, which is a 1-hour train trip from London, and there you can find quite talented people really cheap, because for some reason people in the UK don't want to move, so they tend to stay where they are born. So if you're an engineer in Sheffield, you don't want to move to London. So this is probably the one most important place in Europe to go to at the moment if you're into mobile. Finally, the most important advice of them all: you should never work with people that you hate, because at some point they will disappoint you. And this might sound fun, but it's actually, I'm actually serious about this. When you internationalize, you will probably talk about in your startup, okay, we need to hire some people that will help you, because this will take a lot of travel and we can't clone ourselves yet, so we need to find some more people. Find people that you like. It sounds stupid to say, but I meet a lot of people all the time that have hired somebody, and then I said, okay, you hired him, is it good? Yeah, he's a really great salesman, but you know, he is a real dick. I said, okay, why did you hire somebody you didn't like? No, but he has such a good sales record. No, you shouldn't do that, because at some point you will start arguing, and then it will all be messy. So don't do that.